This is an ABC 3340 special presentation.
We have a powerhouse, symmetrical, classic major hurricane.
The building was shaking. You could hear the building groaning and moaning.
We were told by the police department to move off the beach because we may be stranded because of flooding.
Orange Beach looking like a war zone.
Right now, these lanes are approximately 5 feet underwater.
And almost every condo appears to have some damage.
And that is Alabama Highway 59. This is unbelievable.
The destruction is absolutely awesome.
This is what it looked like when Ivan came ashore last night.
And this is what it looks like tonight, exactly 1 month later. Good evening, I'm James Spann, live from the Alabama Gulf Coast in Orange Beach, and this is Face to Face with Hurricane Ivan. On September 16, 2004, Hurricane Ivan scored a direct hit on the Alabama Gulf Coast, packing sustained winds of over 130 miles per hour. Damage was widespread and severe, affecting much of the state, but especially the Gulf Coast. Tonight, during the next 60 minutes, we'll take a look at the destruction left behind by Hurricane Ivan. We'll show you what it looked like 1 month ago and what it looks like here tonight. Obviously, with a storm of this magnitude, the recovery efforts will take some time. Many of you watched with us on September 16th as we saw the first pictures of the devastation that Ivan left along the Gulf Coast. Tonight, that devastation is still evident. Along some parts of the coast, it appears that Ivan just blew through yesterday. Elsewhere, people are getting back to normal, but it's a long and tedious process. Contractors and cleanup crews lined the streets with mountains of rubble still waiting to be picked up. Some realty companies have gone into a 24/7 mode to get their properties ready for visitors again. Coming up, we'll tell you when you can come back to enjoy the coast. And we'll see how this storm produced a tale of two cities when coastal portions of Gulf Shores were cut off from the rest of the state. Of course, we can't forget central Alabama took a beating as well. Tropical storm force winds roared through the area, and the fast and furious rains were too much for the ground to absorb. That made for some amazing scenes as flash floods prompted emergency rescues and forced others out of their homes. Later on, we'll have a look at central Alabama's recovery. But first tonight, let's talk about the Gulf Coast. There is no doubt from what we've seen here today that these communities are in the recovery mode already. Places like Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, Romar Beach, the Fort Morgan area out around West Boulevard. There's a beehive of activity. But again, with a storm like this, there are a lot of questions. People want to know, did Gulf Shores survive? What will it look like here in the months and years to come? Well, there's no doubt it will take some time, but this evening we'd like to show you how the recovery has progressed in exactly 1 month. This was Alabama Highway 59 the morning after Ivan roared through. Storm surge brought the Gulf well inland, cutting off Alabama's famous beaches from the rest of the state. This is what that same area looks like today, 1 month later. North of Ivan's waterline, it's easy to overlook the signs that a major storm just passed through. But south of where the beach came in, it's impossible. Debbie Fagan and her family are among the business owners that took a direct hit. But on this day, she's left her place behind to do back-breaking labor to help a friend get back in business.
From 8 o'clock in the morning, we shovel sand. We get off about 4 o'clock. Shovel sand the whole day till it's all gone.
And when that will be, no one is sure.
I hate it now. I hate that sand. It's hard work.
In just a few hours, nature's fury was enough to wash away what had taken years to build. An aerial view just after the storm showed how newly formed channels tore through Alabama 182, making it practically impassable. Thanks to quick repair work, today you can drive down the highway again. But you'll be amazed at what you see. Some condos that look fairly intact from the road are reduced to rubble on the other side. Still, the message from practically everyone down here is that the coast will be back.
Every day gets a little better, and it does. And hopefully within a year, we'll be back to normal.
The question everybody is asking is, how did my favorite hangout survive the hurricane? I've been coming down here with my family for many years. We eat at the same restaurants, stay at the same hotels and condominiums, and you're probably the same way. And we want to provide answers all the way from the Flora-Bama to the favorite seafood joints here. Here's ABC 3340's Kevin Stewart.
Owen Gray is the man behind the counter. He's also the man behind Big O's Seafood Grill. On any given day, it is packed with natives and tourists alike, even the hours right after the storm.
We wanted to give everybody somewhere to sort of collect their thoughts and you know, cry and just share what damage was done to their homes.
Big O's itself suffered little damage. It first opened up to relief workers and members of the media, then offered free meals to a storm-ravaged community.
We probably served about 15,000 over 11, 12-day period.
When it comes to nightlife, the Pink Pony Pub has earned a reputation all its own. As you can see, Ivan battered the pony, causing extensive damage. While our efforts to contact the owner have been unsuccessful, a person who works for the hangout says it will reopen. Just down the beach, Sea & Suds expects to be serving soon. They're ripping up the carpet and replacing the decks after Ivan gave them a washout.
Right now, we're shooting for the first of the year. You know, we think that might be a realistic goal.
Because staying closed is not an option.
The Sea & Sudses and the Mikey's and the Pink Pony Pubs and, you know, all those kinds of places are places that people, you know, kind of remember when they come to our area here.
And no one wants them to forget. Face to Face with Ivan, I'm Kevin Stewart, ABC 3340.
Perhaps the most popular joint down here in the Alabama Gulf Coast is the Flora-Bama. It sits on the Alabama-Florida state line just about 5 miles east of where we're sitting right now in Orange Beach. That joint really took a jolt from Ivan. Initially, reports came in that the Flora-Bama was destroyed, but those were probably a little premature. ABC 3340's Christopher Sine tells us the Flora-Bama will be back.
The ground across from the Flora-Bama gave way, but the bar itself remains standing, surviving a brush with the most powerful storm of its time.
It used to be we could just pull out the carpets and wash it down, but this is going to be a little bit more of a challenge this time.
If you've spent much time on the coast, there's a good chance you made some memories along these hallowed halls for lounge lovers. Problem is, some of the halls washed away, giving the Flora-Bama too much of a waterfront view.
We will rebuild. What we're not really 100% sure of is exactly how.
It's still unclear if the building can be saved or whether the owners will have to build a new, elevated hangout.
But if we build a new one, I guarantee it won't be pink with turquoise trim on the roof. Yeah.
Even after Ivan's fury, the Flora-Bama's character still shines through. Much of the ceiling may be gone, but the risque articles of clothing that hung from it remain. And the unfinished boards still proudly proclaim everyone who was here. As Birmingham native Joe Gilchrist surveys the damage of his beloved bar, he's reminded of what he calls a mission.
I think that our job is to take what we've been given here in terms of a beach and in terms of a club, a bar, and give people a reason to enjoy life and have a good time.
And those good times will be on tap again. Just when is uncertain. Face to Face with Ivan, I'm Christopher Sine, ABC 3340.
And we should mention that we are told when the Flora-Bama opens again, they're throwing a big party and everybody is invited. Now, interestingly enough, one business that is up and running even as we speak is charter fishing. As of this weekend, Zeke's Marina Landing, which is just down the road from where we are, is putting people back out across the water once again. The charter industry is huge here on the Alabama Gulf Coast. We'll learn more on the recovery of the charter fishing industry now from Maggie Pateau.
Along the Gulf Coast, it's the sound of progress. There's no time to sit on the dock of this bay. Forget watching the tide roll away. There's work to be done.
We're not going to be fully operational, but we'll have fuel bait and ice, we'll have parking for customers.
And they have it all 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Maurice Fitzsimmons, or Captain Fitz as he's called, runs a tight ship, getting his customers back on the water before snapper season ends.
The best thing I could do was try to get this facility back in line to give my people a chance to at least have a couple weeks to get back in business before the federal government shut them down season-wise.
While the old docks are being replaced, Zeke's came out of the storm fairly unscathed. Over in the dry storage building, only 3 out of the more than 230 boats suffered severe damage. As for the fishing,
if you can find a reef, it's good.
Helping salvage a season that almost became the one that got away. Face to face with Ivan, I'm Maggie Pateau, ABC 3340.
So it's definitely good to see that many of the tourist attractions are up and running again, but what about finding a place to stay? Many of the motels and condominiums here took a beating. What you see behind me is the Windermere. Now, the good news, this condominium was scheduled to be torn down anyway, but Hurricane Ivan simply sped up that process. ABC 3340's Chris Tatum now takes a look at the industry that's recovering in terms of condos and hotels here.
Weeks after the storm, it's still hard for Bonnie Fitch to go back to her Gulf Shores condo.
This was sort of where everybody hung out.
She's one of only a handful of people who called Las Palmas their permanent home. Ivan left her homeless. She's just getting on her feet.
And there's a lot of people here that are homeless, plus there's a lot of people that are coming down to do the repairs and stuff, so there's a severe crunch for housing.
She tells a tale of two cities, how the Intracoastal Waterway now divides Gulf Shores in more ways than one.
North of the island, it's business as usual, as if there was never anything that happened, and this part, it'll take years.
But repairs are on the fast track at many of the Gulf's most popular resorts. All 14 of the Phoenix condos survived with minimal damage.
We're looking at a December 1 opening date for some of our buildings, and the goal is to have all the buildings back online by January 1st.
Marie Curran believes modern construction kept the Phoenix all suites high and dry. There's not much left outside, and out at the Shoalwater, the pool's in pieces. While the upstairs rooms dry out, crews check the foundation below and hope tourists will one day return.
Definitely by our snowbird season beginning January 1st. Prior to that, we have canceled reservations until the middle of November.
Despite how it looks now, developers insist this coast will once again become a hot spot.
I would expect about 80% of our inventory back up for spring break.
We think spring break's going to be just fine and looking for a great summer season.
Face to face with Ivan, I'm Chris Tatum, ABC 3340.
We should point out the silver lining part of this big hurricane. It typically happens that after big weather disasters, sometimes good things can happen. Joining me right now is Herb Malone. Herb is the CEO of the Alabama Gulf Coast Convention and Visitors Bureau. And Herb, good things will happen as a result of this horrible hurricane.
Absolutely, James. A hurricane gives you an opportunity to rebuild, renew, restore. You know, when things are cleaned up, we'll be spick and span and ready for visitors.
A lot of people want to know about fall travel. Can they come down here this fall?
Fall right now, I'd say need to give us just a few more weeks. We have done extensive surveys with our accommodations, and we've got about 10% of them that are open today, and most of those are full.
Now, what about the snowbird season, the spring break season, and next summer? Those are big questions, too.
Sure. Snowbird season starts January 1. We expect to have about 60% of our units back in service. By spring break, about 80% of our inventory will be up and running. And by summer of 05, we'll be back on par with summer of 04.
Now, the Shrimp Festival was canceled this year. How will that impact the tourism industry on the Gulf Coast?
Well, the Shrimp Festival is one of our key events for the year, and certainly it's a great event for the fall and helps us get through the shoulder season. So cancellation of it was necessary. I mean, it just really couldn't happen with all that's going on here. And basically, everybody's getting ready for the biggest and best ever Shrimp Festival they've ever had in 2005.
The sugar white sand is something people think about when they think of the coast down here. Tell me about the restoration process, because so much of that sand was deposited inland by the storm surge. How will you rebuild the beaches here?
Well, the first thing they're doing is they're trying to recapture and recirculate all the sand they can that's down there by scooping it up off the streets, running it through some sand sifters, getting the debris out, and distributing it back out on the beach. Secondly, there's a beach renourishment project to extend the entire coast through Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, and the Gulf State Park that's already been designed. It was planned prior to the storm. It will start work in January, and it will put the beaches back better than they were ever before.
If somebody has a question about something down here, what's the best way to get in touch with your organization?
Well, they can call us at 1-800-745-7263, or they can check out our website at www.gulfshores.com or orangebeach.com, and we keep very close tabs on what's open and schedules for things to reopen, and it's a great information source.
Great. Herb, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you for being here, James.
Another big issue, it's power concerns, getting the electricity back onto those people that live on the Alabama Gulf Coast. Power crews are roaming the the area working to restore electricity in places still in the dark. It's a tedious process to clean out underground facilities and work around debris, but the Baldwin EMC Electric Co-op says all lines along the beach are back up. In some places, though, turning back on the power is contingent upon other repairs. Now, another fascinating element of the storm was watching the live coverage on ABC 3340 coming from our crew here on the Gulf Coast, the reporters and the photographers, and they have absolutely amazing stories to tell. Now, while some of our crew was able to hunker down about 1 mile inland, part of the crew was actually able to ride out the storm on the Gulf Coast in a condominium. Not that they intended to do that, but conditions deteriorated so rapidly. Christopher Sine, our reporter, and Bill Castle, the chief photographer, actually rode out the storm in a condominium on the Gulf Coast.
There was a point in time where I thought that this is it, and I had a really heart-to-heart with myself, and there were a lot of prayers involved, and whenever we came out of there, it felt like a dream.
When we got up that morning and came out, my first initial thought was, I've got to get a hold of the guys that are on the beach. I was more worried about them on the beach because I hadn't heard from them in a while.
Later, we'll hear more from our crew on what it was like to come face-to-face with Ivan and why they go to such lengths to cover a storm. It's a story you won't forget. Live from the Alabama Gulf Coast, you're watching Face to Face with Ivan on ABC 3340.
It's going to take us months and years to get back what it took nature 24 hours to destroy. And it's just gone.
The Gulf Coast faces a long road to recovery after coming face-to-face with Ivan exactly 1 month ago. Welcome back to the Alabama Gulf Coast. Immediately after the arrival of Ivan, emergency response crews have come into the Gulf Coast region from around Alabama and around the country, and still today they maintain a very heavy presence. In fact, much of the activity is centered over in Mobile County. This is the emergency field office operating out of the Mobile Convention Center. This view shows how it's set up like a city, with each hallway between agencies organized by street names. Workers from the federal government are also here with assistance from Washington. And agencies such as the Small Business Administration have set up to help local business owners get back on their feet. This office will stay operational for a few more weeks, but many of the agencies will stay in the areas for months. Emergency responders admit that in a way, Alabama was lucky to have no deaths directly related to Hurricane Ivan. Some, quite frankly, believe that we were too lucky and that Ivan caught the state off guard. ABC 3340's Dave Baird shows us that Ivan taught Alabama a lesson on how to handle future storms.
September 14th. With Ivan quickly approaching, Governor Bob Riley joined authorities in Baldwin County in taking the pulse of emergency preparations.
The only reason we're down here today, ladies and gentlemen, is to find out what else we can do.
Turns out there was a lot left to be done. Ivan was ready to deal a blow stronger than shelters along the coast could handle.
So when you look at a storm that exceeds what our building code is, we don't feel like we can safely put people in our schools for shelters.
James Hinton is the fire chief in Foley.
I would say we got caught off guard. Yes, sir.
He says with a major storm just 36 hours away, it was too late to learn that designated shelters were shutting out the people they were built to protect.
We've got mandatory evacuations ordered with no place for people to go.
Governor Riley says he too didn't feel an initial sense of alarm.
What really complicated that whole procedure was finding out that some of the shelters that were going to be in place, even the hospital down there, had to be closed.
With shelters closing, Hinton says mass confusion resulted. He says that's one reason Foley's mobile home parks were up to 90% occupied during the storm.
If we would have caught near the winds that Escambia, Florida, Escambia County, Alabama caught, I'm afraid instead of using the refrigeration trucks for ice, we'd have been using them to store bodies.
Authorities in Baldwin County just recently prepared for a hurricane, but Hinton says there were no plans for any storm stronger than a Category 3. Bruce Ballman is the director of the Alabama Emergency Management Agency.
Some of the exercises that we have been conducting both internal to my agency and with the counties, we were looking at a Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane. And yes, we should be preparing worst case scenario.
Ballman admits not everything went smoothly as Ivan approached. He says shelters opened slower than he would have hoped, but he points out that the Red Cross staffed more than 100 shelters statewide.
I think we were there for them, and as a matter of fact, the intent is not to have them stay in an area that is going to be sustaining 155-mile-an-hour winds. The intent is to get them out of the area, because I don't care what kind of structure you're in that particular area, anything is unsafe.
And while authorities such as Hinton say evacuation orders came too late, Ballman and the governor defend the timing of their decisions. However, there were surprises.
I think that we had enough time. I'm not too sure that we anticipated Florida, Alabama, Mississippi all sending their traffic to Alabama.
While the governor and the state EMA say the safest course of action is to flee a major storm, both expect a push for stronger building codes near the coast. Schools often serve as shelters, but one potential problem for Baldwin County was that many of its schools are relatively new, and it will be years before they're replaced with buildings that adhere to a tougher code. Hinton just wants a clearer plan and safer buildings before another storm comes.
It doesn't matter whose responsibility it is. Let's work together to fix the problem.
Everyone agrees many things went right during the storm. The governor cites planning to quickly get people out of harm's way.
One of the reasons that we were as successful as we were in reversing the lanes on I-65 is the Department of Transportation went down and practiced it last year.
And everyone agrees Alabama was fortunate after being at the mercy of nature.
I think God also, gave us a blessing that spared a lot of people that it could have been so much worse.
Face to face with Ivan, I'm Dave Baird, ABC 3340.
Governor Riley says emergency responders will meet soon to evaluate their performance during Hurricane Ivan. Authorities say improvements are desperately needed in many areas, such as taking emergency power to devastated areas right after the hurricane. Also expect legislation in Montgomery next year aimed at better equipping the coast to handle future storms. Government assistance is still available to anyone who suffered damage at the hands of Ivan, including people in central Alabama. Just dial 1-800-621-FEMA. Assistance will be available at least through mid-November. Already more than $50 million in disaster help has been approved. Still to come, covering the storm. Hear from the ABC 3340 crew members who really did come face to face with Hurricane Ivan. But first, making ends meet. Local business owners lost their livelihood. Now they're getting ready for your return while struggling to survive.
I don't think any of us had any idea how bad it was going to be.
But 1 month later, a spirit of recovery flows through the Gulf Coast as people try to get back to normal. It's been 25 years since a major hurricane rolled through the Alabama Gulf Coast prior to Ivan. That was Hurricane Frederick in September of 1979. I covered that storm my very first week on Birmingham television. A lot of devastation for that one, but after seeing both storms, I think this one created more damage here in southern Baldwin County in places like Gulf Shores and Orange Beach. Now, of course, Hurricane Ivan caused more than just property damage. The wrath is taking huge financial toll on industries that depend on people flocking to the Gulf Coast. ABC 3340's Christopher Sine shows us that the economic recovery is just beginning.
The chalkboard menus are nearly all that's left intact, but you can't get a pink bikini mocha or a sandpiper latte at the Sip and Surf. This ocean-themed internet coffee house became part of the sea itself.
We're 5 blocks from the beach now. The water was a mile, almost a mile north of the beach.
Kelly Vile and her partner returned to the coast to find their business in ruins, but they have hope.
Well, thank God for FEMA.
But Vile isn't sure how much money she'll get from the government, and that will determine whether these coffee makers perk back up. Until then, she's got another problem.
There aren't any jobs to be had unless you work construction.
Local business leaders acknowledge the plight of people who lost everything.
It seems like it's insurmountable.
But they say looks can be deceiving.
Within a year, if you hold on and make it back, business is going to be better than ever.
An economist who specializes in hurricane recovery recently paid a visit, saying the Alabama Gulf Coast holds a special place in the hearts of tourists.
There is an imprint of familiarity and affection from our visitors who keep coming back.
And people like Vile are counting on that for their future on the coast.
We're all shooting for spring break to be up and running.
Face to face with Ivan, I'm Christopher Sine, ABC 3340.
There is much more to come on Face to Face with Ivan, including some absolutely amazing stories from our crew members that covered the storm on the Gulf Coast. They did much more than just brave the elements.
The worst feeling in the world was being in that stairwell. We had gathered in the stairwell. Bill and I were just looking at each other thinking, what are we going to do?
But first, people in Gulf Shores aren't just picking up the pieces, they're getting ready for new leadership. Stay with us. One man that knows the coast like nobody else is Gulf Shores Mayor David Bodenhammer. David, thank you very much for joining us this evening. You were very courteous to our crew. They actually were with you in the Gulf Shores Municipal Complex during the night of the storm. That was a remarkable night. Tell me about it.
Well, about 25 or so of us were in City Hall, Chief of Police, some of the emergency personnel, some local people. And some of your crew members, stayed with us throughout the night there, and we commiserated with one another during the storm.
Now, you were in business here in September of 1979 when Frederick came through, and you obviously saw that recovery. How do you think Gulf Shores will recover this time with Ivan?
Well, I'm seeing the same sense of community and pulling together and positive attitude that people had after Frederick. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal that people have got the attitude that they have. And
you're about to step down as mayor. What's it like knowing that the city is going through this major process now and you're about to step down? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, it's going to be a different time for us. I've been in office 16 years as the mayor in Gulf Shores and seen a lot of things and gone through a lot of instances. But I'm looking forward to it. We've got a good group of people newly elected to the City Council. Our runoff election's October 26th. New administration will take office November 1st. And looking forward to it.
As the people here rebuild, I understand the city has some safeguards in place, ranging from strict requirements for contractors to maintaining law and order. Tell me how that process goes.
Well, we just adopted the new International Building Code Monday night a week ago to strengthen our building codes. And of course, we've got a number of processes that are in place relative to registering new businesses, contractors, trying to protect the public as best we can.
How do you think the buildings fared during this storm? Did they fare pretty much as you expected they would?
The larger structures did what they were designed to do. They withstood the storm fairly well. Significant damage, lower levels, ground infrastructure, that type of thing. But overall, most of the major structures, made out pretty well.
What would you tell somebody that's considering a trip to Gulf Shores in the coming weeks or maybe for spring break or next summer? What would you tell them?
Well, initially I'd say make it a short trip, maybe a day trip. But facilities, as you have heard earlier, will be opening up over the next few months. We hope by the first of the year, maybe 50% or so of our accommodations will be open. And we'll be back, no doubt about that. It's just going to take a little time.
So you figure by the summer of 2005, things are pretty much back to normal.
We won't be spit and polished in all respects, but I think most everybody will have things functional and pretty well in operating condition that we'll be able to accommodate folks to stay as long as they like.
Mayor, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you being here with us this evening.
Appreciate it.
Of course, Gulf Shores' neighbor to the east is Orange Beach, and it took a direct hit from the storm as well. ABC 3340 meteorologist Brian Peters and photographer Jeff Myers were among the first allowed into the city to see the devastation. Now we hear from the mayor of Orange Beach about the recovery there.
He says it's by far the biggest task he's ever faced. Orange Beach Mayor Steve Russo is working to get his city back to normal. Today, a drive down Beach Boulevard shows signs of recovery, but memories of the night the storm struck are still fresh in everyone's minds. Mayor Russo talked to us about riding out the storm in what had become a ghost town.
You're just inside and it's dark and you can't see. You hear the wind, you hear things moving around, but you're really not aware of exactly what's going on.
The next day, Mayor Russo was able to survey the battered beach. Driving down Alabama 182, it was almost impossible to recognize his own community.
I mean, you could ride down the beach and a place you knew there had been houses before, there was just no houses at all, just empty spaces.
Mayor Russo says Hurricane Ivan is advancing plans to refurbish parts of Orange Beach. Many of the battered condos were already slated for demolition, and a beach regeneration project was already on the table. The mayor says times like this just come with the territory of living by the sea.
The best part of living here, you know, like tornadoes in Birmingham, you know, it's just kind of part of the deal.
Face to face with Ivan, I'm meteorologist Brian Peters, ABC 3340.
There's much more to come on Face to Face with Ivan, including a look at how the big storm ravaged the central part of Alabama. But coming up next, we'll take a look at the Alabama State Park. What will become of that park? It was virtually destroyed by the storm. Stay with us. Ivan's fury extended outside Alabama, causing widespread damage in neighboring Florida. Just one example is the Interstate 10 bridge across Escambia Bay. It was no match against the winds and water Ivan served up. Two-way traffic is now flowing across the westbound lanes, but it will be about 2 more months before the eastbound lanes are ready. Welcome back to Face with Hurricane Ivan, live from the Alabama Gulf Coast. We are proud to announce that ABC 3340 is making a DVD available of our coverage and raw video from the Gulf Coast crew for you. They go on sale Monday at Compass Bank branch locations all across Alabama. Some remarkable video is included on this DVD. The cost is $10, and every cent of that money goes to the American Red Cross to help hurricane relief efforts here in South Alabama. So again, look for the Face to Face with Ivan DVD that goes on sale Monday at Compass Bank branch locations all across Alabama. $10. All of that money goes to the American Red Cross. As we've learned over the years, times of natural disaster like this can bring together people, the human spirit. It brings people together. We've learned that. We talked with Governor Bob Riley about weathering the storm and rebuilding one of Alabama's most treasured landmarks. Here's ABC 3340 meteorologist John Oldshoe.
In the hours before Ivan devoured the state's pristine beaches, Governor Bob Riley said it was an event that would turn out-of-towners into Alabamians.
The potential for loss of life was just dramatic up along that coast.
As the cleanup began, he says he saw neighbors coming together, as Alabamians often do.
You could see people, you know, hundreds of people with a chainsaw going out and cutting up the limbs, dragging it up to the right-of-way.
And even though so much debris remains, the governor says 1 month later, Alabama's coast doesn't even look like the same place. Raleigh joined President Bush for a tour of the damage 3 days after Ivan made landfall.
And when he got to Baldwin County, he said, "This is worse than I had ever anticipated."
The governor himself was awed with what he'd seen along the coast.
I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect to see, 6, 8-story condominiums just laying on the ground.
Another casualty of the storm is the Gulf State Park.
It is a total loss, and so I guess the plans at this point is to just go ahead and bulldoze it down, build a really nice park back.
This comes at a time when the state was already negotiating to renovate the park. Even with destruction all around, the governor still sees hope on the horizon.
When you look back 5 years from now, when you look back 2 years from now and you look at that beach and you see how it's going to be rebuilt, I think it's probably going to be more attractive and bring more people back into that area than ever before.
Face to Face with Ivan. I'm meteorologist John Oldshoe, ABC 3340.
As always with a hurricane, the immediate coast takes the big hit, but Ivan was so large it took a long time to spin down. Ivan was a hurricane well up into central Alabama, and in our part of the state, we had some big problems as well. We had problems from the wind with downed trees, but also major problems from driving rain. The Birmingham metropolitan area had 10 inches of rain because of Ivan. ABC 3340's Linda Mays takes a look at central Alabama then and now.
Ivan rained down on Birmingham and rained and rained. Then the waters rose. One of the most captivating scenes played out live on ABC 3340.
That's why we tell people don't drive through water of unknown depth.
James Carroll was simply trying to take a cooler to some family members, but it was a risky mission as floodwaters surrounded his truck next to Macklin Park.
Somebody needs to be sent out there to get that guy out of that truck. Nobody should go out there but first responders.
But as the waters rose, the stranded man chose to get out into the river that had quickly formed.
So this is the person that was in the truck, has now gotten out of the truck.
He's trying to figure it out.
We are absolutely not sure whether this gentleman is aware that, that a rescue boat is on the way, but apparently he has opted to get out of this vehicle.
Go back! Somebody's coming, go back!
Armed with the assurance that help was on the way, Carroll waited in the bed of his truck until he was rescued.
Now, they say there's sewage in this water.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I didn't take the swim that I was about to take.
Other drivers put themselves at risk of the same problem.
Boy, the water way up on this one, Brenda.
This is an alarming situation.
As more people ignored warnings and drove into high waters. Dozens of people had to be rescued at Homewood's Lakeshore Garden Apartments. Floodwaters became an unwelcome guest in their homes. It was a scene made for the Ark, but this time scuba divers provided the vehicle to safety for people whose apartments were submerged.
People, they were trying to stop it, but it just really was nothing they can do. The water just was coming, just kept coming.
In Vestavia Hills, too much rain too fast was the recipe for another problem. A mudslide forced the closure of Highway 31. Before the storm hit, Central Alabamians followed the lead of their neighbors on the coast, pouring into home improvement stores, getting ready to come face to face with Ivan. Now, if you look around, you can still find evidence of the storm, but overall, life is back to normal for most people, and some of them will remember a tough lesson.
What did you learn from this experience?
To listen to what you hear as far as the weather's concerned.
Face to Face with Ivan, I'm Linda Mays, ABC 3340.
When we come back, covering the coast when a hurricane's on its way. Hear firsthand accounts from our crew members about coming face to face with a monster storm. One month later, and the cleanup still ahead is mind-boggling. The Wade Ward Nature Park in Gulf Shores was literally trashed by Hurricane Ivan. Alligators still lurk beneath the brush as crews work long hours to clear the debris. Before the time of landfall, at one point Ivan was a rare Category 5 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale. It was at that time, when the storm was over the Gulf of Mexico, that Brian Peters and Kim Harden of our staff flew into the eye of the storm. It's the first time in history a Birmingham television crew went up in a Hurricane Hunter airplane. The plane made passes over the storm, gathering data on pressure, temperature, and wind. And from above, the ferocious storm had a surreal appearance.
It was not a violent situation. It was really one of beauty, with the stadium effect where the eye wall curves as you're looking at the view.
But as awesome as that was, perhaps the most amazing vantage point for this big hurricane was actually on the ground. An entire crew from ABC 3340 took great risks as they covered the storm's arrival. Tonight, the fury of Ivan in their own words.
The eerie feeling is when you're going 65 south, you're one of the few cars going south.
One of the things you want to try to do as a meteorologist is experience the weather. And so it was an exciting time too. The adrenaline was already flowing just by leaving the station early that morning and heading out.
I told our church, my Sunday school, before I was going, I says, hey, you know, Hurricane Ivan makes the turn, I'm gone, keep me in prayers. And I said, also pray for my crew.
I didn't know what to expect. I don't think I was actually prepared for what Ivan really did.
I mean, you could tell by the reaction of Brian and James how they predicted it was going to be a big storm and it was going to be a doozy.
I expect it to be the worst hurricane. More than anything, the thing that really sticks with me is watching the storm roll in very early.
When it got dark, that's whenever it really started to hit.
It got bad. It got bad real quick. There was a reason why everybody got out of town.
So we got across from City Hall and Gulf Shores, parked the truck in like a V of the building. That way the wind would get off the dish and we could go live as much as we could.
We wanted to make sure everybody was safe. We immediately thought that we wanted to be safe, of course. And we thought, let's go down to the beach and we would go back and forth. We'd get a safe route, safe location. We would go back and forth shooting video.
The trees were bending, the lights were, coming, bouncing all over the place. And
we were about a mile inland off of Highway 59. And when I got a chance to walk outside and see where the storm surge had come in, and that's when I realized how close we really were.
I think probably one of the things that was going through my mind is, what have I gotten myself into?
I mean, there was a point where we were sitting in the SAT truck and the wind was blowing it so much you could hear the frame creaking.
The dish is ready to take 80 mile an hour per mile winds without being blown off the truck.
There's adrenaline. Your heart's beating 90-0. I mean, you're pumped up, as they say, because this is, in our business, this is what we do for a living. People want to see our pictures. Our pictures are what people want to see.
It became dark because the power had been cut. We decided after we had shot video, we would go back to the crew. Well, little did we know that we would get stranded, and that's where our lives took an eerie twist.
I kind of felt like a father over the group, being the oldest one there. I always made sure I knew where they were going, and got a little worried when Bill and Chris got stuck out of there. And
I go down to check on the truck, and at this point, the surge, you couldn't tell in the front from where we were, but the surge was already taking away the sand underneath the condominium. Erosion was taking place, and the wall had now collapsed on top of the truck.
The worst feeling in the world was being in that stairwell. We had gathered in the stairwell. Bill and I were just looking at each other thinking, what are we going to do?
I was concerned for him, but I figured everything was going to be okay.
I'll never forget that noise the rest of my life.
I would say it got very dicey around 2 o'clock. And I don't know if I ever really thought we wouldn't make it, but I knew we would be totally different when we come out of that situation.
You'd hear something snap, you know where it come from, you put your head on a swivel. Somebody asked me what it was like. I said, it's like being a quarterback with no offensive line. You're looking for what's going to hit you from whatever direction.
The inside of me was just hollow. I didn't know what to think.
And I started shooting underneath this condominium of this surge flying in here, and we were playing with fire here.
That type of wind and rain and force is unbelievable. It's just unbelievable what nature can do.
And I'll never forget the look in Bill's eye whenever we're on that 4th floor, building moaning, building shaking, the handrails are vibrating, they're solid steel, and Bill said maybe we ought to move down.
That's the moment we realized it was serious.
I thought that I was going to die.
And there was a lot of just quiet moments.
There's a buddy system there.
But it really did get to the point where Bill and I looked at each other and we didn't even say a word. We just stared at one another.
I think it changed a little bit. I think that I realized that, you can't push it like I've always pushed it. You got to see God's fury at its best.
When we got up that morning, came out, my first initial thought was, I've got to get a hold of the guys that are on the beach. I was more worried about them on the beach because I hadn't heard from them in a while.
We walked up to the balcony, to the 4th floor balcony, and looked out, and the first thing I saw was the road. And it looked almost like a ghostly white wave of sand rolling across the road, what used to be the road. And the wind was still blowing in that sand, just skirting across the road. We then walked downstairs, walked outside, and before Bill even shot any video of it, we looked to the right and we saw that the state pier was in pieces. We walked out about 500 yards, looked at the main road, looked to our left, which is down towards the 59 intersection, and all you could see was sand and sagging traffic signals. And it was the most eerie, odd feeling.
The destruction was just more, I think, than most people imagined.
I didn't realize we were the only 2 people on the beach until we made a 2-mile walk from that building all the way to the 59 intersection. When we got to that intersection, the police chief the city planner, and the mayor were waiting on us. And they had a big stick, and they were sticking it in the ground. They didn't know where to walk, and we were just walking. We didn't care what we encountered, what we had just been through. And once we got there, we had no idea that we were the only ones.
Most people can't say they survived a Cat 4.
I'd do it again. I'd do it again. Not as close. Wouldn't be as close, but I'd do it again.
Once again, a reminder, you can own a DVD copy of ABC 3340's extensive coverage of Hurricane Ivan. It includes much of our on-air coverage and raw video taken by our crew here on the coast during the storm. The DVD goes on sale Monday at Compass Bank branch locations all across Alabama. The cost is $10, and keep in mind every cent will go to the American Red Cross and their hurricane relief effort here in South Alabama. Once again, let's go back exactly 1 month ago. This was the scene on Alabama's Gulf Coast. Many of the places we all know and love were damaged or destroyed in only a few hours from this remarkable, powerful hurricane. Just a reminder that everything in life, including life itself, is very fragile. Tonight, we are all thankful for no loss of life and very few injuries as a direct result of Hurricane Ivan, thanks to preparedness, warning, and response, the three keys to saving lives during hurricanes and tornadoes. And we can all look forward to the rebuilding and a better Alabama Gulf Coast. That's it for our special tonight. Thank you for watching. ABC 3340's Night Team News is next. I'm James Spann, live on the Alabama Gulf Coast. Good evening.